I spent the last 2 weeks reading hundreds of spec sheets from all these brands and comparing dozens of benchmark tests. Now, after countless hours of research, I can finally say that these are the best laptops going from $200 all the way to $1,600. We're gonna start with the $200 to $300 category where we have the IdeaPad Slim 3 Chromebook. And before you tell me that you can find a much better laptop for the same price on Best Buy, I want you to know that all the laptops in this video are priced at the MSRP from the manufacturer's website. I actually did that specifically so that you can be sure the price doesn't go up by the time you watch this video. If anything, there's a really good chance that you find them even cheaper. Now that we clear that out, let's have a quick look at the specs of this Lenovo. This is a 14-inch Full HD laptop with a standard 60Hz refresh rate and a decent level of brightness. This particular model doesn't come with a touchscreen, although there is another variation of it that does, so don't get confused here. One thing to keep in mind here is that this laptop uses a TN panel, which would look fine for you sitting right in front of it, but for someone else viewing it from an angle, the colors would start to fade away. For the performance, we have the MediaTek Companion 520, which is an entry-level CPU optimized for Chromebooks. This processor is built in a way that prioritizes efficiency, hence the 13.5 hours battery life, but would still give you a decent performance for light work, including browsing, running some productivity apps, and a bit of streaming too. Since it comes with 4GB of RAM, the multitasking experience would be a bit more limited, but remember the operating system here is Chrome OS, which is generally lighter on resources compared with Windows or Mac OS. If you check online reviews, you see that many people actually found this combination of RAM and processor to be fine for light work and schoolwork. But of course, that's not the case for everyone. If you want to make sure the RAM doesn't become a problem though, I would suggest a laptop with at least 8GB. When it comes to storage, this laptop has 64GB of eAMC 5.1, which may not seem like a lot compared to other laptops out there, but if you're mainly using it for documents, spreadsheets, PDFs and other files like this, you should be fine. Most laptops in this price range would have between 32 and 128GB of storage anyway, but they would also come with a microSD slot in case you want to extend that, and so is the case for this laptop. One final mention here is that while this is definitely a very affordable option, make sure that the apps you want to run are compatible with the operating system, because Chromebooks are known to support a limited range of apps compared with Windows or Mac OS. Next up, for the $300 to $400 category, we have the Dell 15 DC15250. This is a slightly bigger 15.6-inch Windows laptop with 120Hz refresh rate this time, so basically much smoother screen motion, and you get an IPS panel instead of that TN on the Chromebook, which essentially means better color and viewing angles. From the get-go, you can see that we start with a much better display spec here. The processor also sees a considerable upgrade since we now have the Intel Core 3 100U, which is far more powerful than the one we spoke about earlier. The U in the name of the processor indicates it was designed for power efficiency, but rest assured it's still gonna have a really good performance in this price bracket. Now, while this is technically designed for efficiency, the battery capacity is a bit smaller, 41 Wh versus 47 on the previous model. Unfortunately, Dell doesn't give us an estimated runtime here, just the capacity, but with that in mind and the fact that it comes with a slightly larger screen, it's safe to assume that you'll get a few hours less compared with a Chromebook. Moving on to RAM, you now get 8GB of DDR4 memory, which is a good upgrade in terms of multitasking experience, but by far the most noticeable upgrade here is the storage. 512GB of SSD. So not only that you get 8 times more storage, but reading and writing data on it, it's also gonna be an awful lot quicker. Honestly, for the combination of specs you're getting, this laptop is one of the best value for money in the entire list. It's safe to say that it will be a really good fit for students and professionals who need that extra bit of multitasking and speed to do their work. And bonus, you don't have to worry too much about storage either, because you get half a tera of SSD. Now, for the next price range of $400 to $500, things get a bit weird, and I'll tell you why in a second. So, the best overall laptop I've seen is this Dell right here for $50 more in the MSRP, which has pretty much the exact same specification apart from the RAM memory and the CPU. Now, here's why I said this category is weird. Most every laptop priced between $400 and $500 MSRP come with either a Ryzen 5 7520U for the processor, like this Dell right here, or something with an even lower performance or a mix of weird component choices. You'd think the manufacturers would justify that by giving you some really good features that you can't miss on, but it's not really the case. Sure, for the RAM memory you now have 8 GB of LPDDR5 instead of DDR4, but while the transfer rate of the memory literally doubles while being more energy efficient, I would still much rather buy the Dell from earlier and get a better CPU. Goes to show that if something is more expensive, that doesn't necessarily mean it's also better. The only other benefit of this laptop would probably be the battery life, since it has the same 41 watt-hour capacity, but the components draw less power overall. There's not much else to say here, so let's draw the line and have a look at an actual upgrade in the $500 to $600 category. We're looking at the Dell 15 DC 15250 again, but with a different configuration this time. What's really cool is that many brands today would give you multiple configuration options for a selection of their laptops, and sometimes they would even let you pick some specific components. This obviously made my job an awful lot more difficult, since I now had to check several variations of components before deciding which one really gives you the best mix of specs. But if that means I can show you a $550 laptop with 16 gigs of RAM and an i5 13th gen processor, I guess it's all worth it in the end. Since this is a variation of the previous Dell, some things will stay the same, like the storage, the display and the battery capacity, but the fact that you get a 10-core CPU and 16 gigs of DDR4 memory makes a big difference. Was there a better processor in this price range? Absolutely. This Asus right here had the i5 120U, but only 8 GB of RAM. And since the two processors were released just a year apart and they had an incremental difference in performance, this made my choice very easy. If you're wondering why you should care about how much RAM your laptop comes with, that's because your processor needs you to store things on it when you're running apps, and once those 8 or 16 GB of RAM fill up, it will start using your SSD instead, which is a lot slower. That's why if I had to choose between getting a slightly better processor or double the RAM memory, I would go for the extra memory. No doubt. So if you find yourself doing a lot of multitasking, whether you're a student or maybe you're working in an office where you run multiple productivity apps all at once, this is gonna be a really good option for you, especially considering the price it goes for. Moving on to the $600 to $700 range, we have this Asus VivoBook. Slightly bigger and brighter display, measuring 16-inch in diagonal, still coming with an IPS panel, but dropping the refresh rate back to 60 Hz. However, you can forget all about that the second you look under the hood and see that it comes packed with the fastest processor we've seen in our list so far, the Intel Core i7 13620H. Just like the U was for power-efficient Intel processor, the H here is the nomination for the highest performance. But with great power comes shorter battery life, and judging by the 42 watt-hour capacity of this laptop, I think you want to keep that charger nearby, just in case. For RAM, we stick with 16 GB of DDR4 again, and for storage, 512 GB of SSD. This laptop really is a significant upgrade from what we've seen so far, and with these specs, you can easily do a lot more than just school work and productivity tasks. Do you want to launch a few virtual machines and containers? Go for it. Emulators? Coding? Sure. The only thing missing here would be a dedicated graphics card to get into the realm of video editing, 3D modeling and other things like that, but we'll get there soon. Before we do though, I'd like to take this moment to remind you that this list doesn't cover every single aspect of these laptops, so if you have any questions about them or just want to compare them with something else, just leave me a comment and I'll be happy to help. Now, for the $700 to $800 category, we have another Asus, the VivoBook 16M1607. Looking at the screen first, we got the exact same specs as earlier, nothing new here. Same 16 GB of RAM too, but this one is using the better, faster, stronger DDR5 memory instead of the DDR4 from earlier. But jokes aside, this means you'll now have an even smoother multitasking experience. For storage, we're looking at 512 GB of SSD once again, and processor-wise, we now have the AMD Ryzen AI5 340. Comparing this with the i7 from earlier, we do see a small increase in single-core performance, but it's still falling short in multi-core by quite a bit. The biggest difference you see here though is that the AMD has a neural processing unit, or NPU for short. With the recent developments in AI, many manufacturers now include this NPU to split the workload better and free up some of your computer resources. You might not see the immediate benefit of this now, but since AI creeps into almost every app and operating system out there, these NPUs will soon become more and more important. Lastly, while this processor uses a more modern architecture with very small transistors, the average battery life that Asus advertises on their page is only 8 hours, so just like with the previous one, make sure to keep that charger nearby. This laptop is also capable of doing pretty much everything the other one can do, but to be completely honest, if you need those extra physical cores for things like virtualization or anything else that requires better multi-core performance, the cheaper Asus with the i7 would still be a better choice overall. Next up, for the $800 to $900 category, we actually have two laptops this time, one with a faster processor and more RAM, and finally our first laptop with a dedicated graphics card. We're gonna start with the Asus VivoBook 14 M1407, which once again has the same display specs except for the smaller screen size of 14-inch. Actually, let's make this even simpler. All the specs remain unchanged apart from the processor, which is now the Ryzen AI7 350. Which has 8 physical cores instead of 6, and all of those cores are also faster, so you also get an increase in performance, as well as a better integrated graphics card. The battery life is now much better compared with the previous one, up to 12 hours according to Asus. And comparing this with the other CPUs we've seen so far, this scores the highest across any benchmark test you throw at it. It's safe to say that it won't disappoint in terms of performance and versatility. For those of you interested in graphics-intensive tasks though, you may want to have a look at this Asus TUF Gaming A15. Yes, this is classed as a gaming laptop, but so is the case for almost every other laptop that comes with a dedicated graphics card in this price bracket. What graphics card is that? None other than the NVIDIA RTX 4060. The laptop version, of course. And while you're not gonna get the exact same performance that a desktop GPU has, this RTX 4060 is still a dedicated graphics card after all, with 8GB of GDDR6 memory, the equivalent of RAM memory for graphics cards basically. The CPU here is definitely a downgrade compared with some of the others, but at least now you can rely on your GPU to handle more graphics intensive tasks and use this laptop for things like 3D rendering, video editing, and even some gaming, since it's a gaming laptop. The RAM also sees an upgrade, not from a capacity perspective, but rather the way it's installed. So instead of having one 16GB stick of DDR5 memory, we now have two sticks of 8GB. How is that any better? Well, that's because your CPU can now communicate with two sticks at the same time instead of one, which effectively doubles the amount of data that can be transferred. Think of it as having a 2-lane highway and a 4-lane highway. The cars can travel at the same speed, but you now have more cars on the road and less waiting time in traffic. This will effectively lead to an increase in multitasking performance and also add redundancy to your system as well. And by redundancy, I mean that if one of the two RAM memories was to fail, you can still run on the other one until you get that replaced. For the storage, we stick with the 512GB of SSD we got used to, and a beefy 90 Wh battery. That may seem like a lot, but remember that you now have to account for additional consumption coming from the dedicated GPU and the 144Hz display, which I forgot to mention earlier. While this laptop does come with a handy feature that switches between the integrated and the dedicated GPU automatically to help you save some battery, I still wish Asus would give us a rough estimate here on how many hours of runtime we can get out from it. Moving on to the $900 to $1,000 category, we actually got three laptops here, and you'll see why in a second. The first one is the Lenovo LOQ 15-inch. As you can see, it has the same display specs, storage, RAM, and GPU, but the processor here is better from a multi-core perspective. Will it draw more power? Sure. Does it have a bigger battery to make up for it? Not exactly. We're looking at a 60 Wh battery, which doesn't really feel like enough when you're considering all the power-hungry components it comes with. The fast charge does give you that 50% battery in only half an hour, but all this performance becomes the number one enemy of your battery life. Nevertheless, if you need this kind of combination of specs for tasks that are more graphics intensive while you're on the go, this is still the best option for up to $1,000. Now for the second laptop, we changed the operating system and have a look at the MacBook Air M4. Some of you may not want or cannot have a macOS because of the apps you want to run, which I completely understand, and this is why I have another Windows option right after this one, so feel free to skip ahead. If that doesn't matter for you, however, just know that this is still a very solid option for $1,000. This MacBook has a 13.6-inch Retina display with a slightly higher resolution than a regular Full HD, the brightest screen we've seen so far with 500 nits and a standard 60Hz refresh rate. The storage is a bit disappointing with only 256GB of SSD, but at least we get 16GB of RAM. The area where this MacBook really shines though is the optimization around their line of proprietary CPUs, the M-series processors. This model comes with the base M4 CPU, and I say base because there is a slightly better one in the $1,200 model that comes with two more physical GPU cores. The thing is though, MacBooks, the macOS and the M series processors work in a different way compared with Windows laptops powered by Intel and AMD. So yeah, on paper, the performance of the M4 can be miles ahead in comparison with the Windows-based options, but you may find that it can still fall behind in certain tasks. Nonetheless, it is a known fact that MacBooks are productivity beasts and a very common choice for many software engineers. Not all, but many. And I know this doesn't have a dedicated GPU, but from experience I can tell you that my MacBook Air M1 does a really good job at editing 4K 30fps videos in DaVinci Resolve, so I think it's safe to say that you can probably get away with some video editing on the M4 too. One last thing to mention here is definitely the battery life, which is advertised to support up to 18 hours of video playback. Pretty much the best battery we have so far. And now onto the third and final laptop in this price range, we have the Lenovo ThinkBook 16 Gen 8. This is one of those build your own types of laptops where brands actually give you the freedom to customize a lot of things. Starting with the display, we have a 16-inch IPS with a Full HD resolution, standard 60Hz refresh rate and a good bit level of brightness. For this configuration, I picked the Intel Core 7-240H for the CPU, which at the moment is the best Intel CPU in the entire list. This one is slightly better in both single and multi-core performance compared with the previous best, the i7-13620H, and falling just a little bit behind the i7-350. Sure, the processor here is not miles better than what we've seen so far, but this configuration features an impressive 32GB of DDR5 memory with two 16GB sticks. To keep it under $1,000, I had to stick with a 256GB of SSD, but for another 30 quid you can upgrade that to 512. Lastly, the battery has a capacity of 45 Wh. Unfortunately, Lenovo doesn't give us any estimate on runtime, but it's safe to assume that it won't draw as much power as some of the previous options with dedicated graphics cards. So if you want a Windows laptop built for heavy multitasking with a really good CPU, this one right here is arguably the best mix of components in our list so far, if you don't need a dedicated graphics card. Next, for the $1,000 to $1,300 category, we got two laptops again, one with a dedicated graphics card and one without it. We'll first look at the Acer Nitro V16. The display here is very similar to the one on the Asus stuff from earlier, but you now have 180Hz refresh rate instead of 144. Same GPU, but a much better CPU for a laptop with a dedicated graphics card. We're talking about the Intel i7-14650HX, which essentially doubles the number of physical cores compared with the Ryzen 7 on the LOQ Lenovo from earlier. Needless to say, both the single core, but more visibly the multi-core performance of the CPU is far ahead in comparison. For RAM, we got 16 gigs of DDR5 again, and as far as storage goes, 512GB of SSD. Acer is no different from the rest because they also tell us only the battery capacity of 59 Wh without estimating the runtime, but by now you can probably guess that you'll need to keep that charger nearby for this kind of specs. If you don't want or need that dedicated graphics card and you'd rather have a laptop with a faster CPU and better battery life, have a look at this Lenovo ThinkPad E16 Gen 3. This is another build-your-own type of laptop, and while it has the best possible combination of specs in this price range, I'm really not impressed. In the same order as before, the screen has the exact same specs as the other build-your-own Lenovo from earlier, but half the RAM, so only one 16GB stick of DDR5 as opposed to two sticks of 16, same 256GB of SSD, and for the battery capacity, 48 Wh versus 45. So why is it $300 more expensive then? Well, that's probably because of the CPU, which, yeah, it's incrementally faster in single core and a good bit faster in multi-core performance, but to spend another $300 for that seems quite excessive, if you ask me. You'd think you can find considerably better laptops when you get to this price bracket, but it's actually quite the opposite. As soon as I went over the $1,000 mark, I've seen dozens of laptops with weird combination of specs, incremental increases in performance, or some gimmicks slapped on just to justify a crazy MSRP. The only other laptop I wanted to talk about before wrapping up this video is the Alienware 16X Aurora Gaming, which sees the best combo of CPU and GPU performance and comes with a terabyte of SSD for the first time. The Intel Core Ultra 7 255HX, as you can guess, it's a few steps up from the 240H from earlier, and yes, it's considerably faster overall. As for the GPU, we now have the RTX 5060 instead of the 4060 we got used to. But what's really disappointing here is that this only gives you 16GB of DDR5 for nearly $1,600. But don't worry, for just another $100 you can turn that into 32. Well, another $100 in MSRP. If you plan to get this on a special offer, make sure that the deal doesn't go away the second you change the default configuration, like it happened to me here. Sure, this is a really good laptop overall and it can do a lot of heavy tasks, but if you get to this price range looking for the best performance, I would still much rather advise you to buy a powerful desktop PC as your main and something like a mid-range laptop for less demanding tasks on the go. If you want to maximize your performance per dollar, you can even pick the components yourself, follow some PC building tutorials and build it from scratch. Right, thank you so much for watching, guys. This was by far the most time we've ever spent on a video, so I really hope you found it useful. If you did, you can help us get it out to more people with just a like, share and a subscribe. And if you didn't, let me know how we can improve. We're always looking back at our older videos, trying to make the new ones a little bit better every time, but the best way to get there sooner is really by listening to your feedback, whether it's good or bad. So don't be afraid to share your honest opinion. Also, if you still have any questions at all, whether it's about a laptop or a technical aspect that confuses you, just drop me a comment below and I'll get back to you. Right, that's it from me. Take care everyone and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.